2020. And leading off our discussion tonight about these developments is Democratic Congressman Mike Quigley of Illinois. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee and was supposed to take part in Gordon Sondland's deposition today. Also joining us, Mika Ouyang. She's a former staff member of the House Intelligence Committee. And Josh Letterman, national political reporter for NBC News. Josh was part of the team that reported those new details about the communication between President Trump and Gordon Sondland in that 5-hour gap. Congressman Quigley, what was it that you wanted to concentrate on with Gordon Sondland today?
I think it's seemingly easy questions to ask, tough to answer about the 5-hour gap. What were the nature of all his communications with the career diplomats and the President of the United States? But you know what? When I was thinking about that question coming, I think the best question for all the Trump associates is this. Why aren't you the whistleblower? How could you stand by when this was happening and not say what we hear from one text? I think it's crazy to do a quid pro quo with military aid with an ally at war with our greatest adversary.
And, Congressman, your reaction to the president's White House counsel sending that letter saying no cooperation, no witnesses, no documents, absolutely nothing. Your impeachment inquiry is unconstitutional, according to the White House counsel.
Yeah, I think they're just making official what they've been doing for 3 years. They've been stonewalling and obstructing any investigation. The special counsel's report details that in extraordinary links. And I think he left it to us to take the ball, and I believe would have indicted the president if it wasn't for a Justice Department policy that says you can't do that. Obviously, we're following the letter of the law. The president is doing everything to obstruct and creating very easily to be reached articles of impeachment on obstruction.
And Mika Ouyang, NBC News is also reporting, Josh Letterman's part of this reporting team, that the communication devices that were being used in a lot of this texting were personal communication devices. That is could be in violation of the federal records keeping law. That was something that Hillary Clinton was attacked for by these same Republicans who are defending all of these practices.
Yeah, I think you see over and over again Republicans doing the things that they blame other people for, whether that's violating records. They blame Biden for corruption when you see the president himself engaging in self-dealing with his children's business operations. I think that really what you see is a lot of projection here. And when you read that letter from the White House to Speaker Pelosi and the other chairman, anyone who's been a teenager or has a teenager, that letter basically reads like the legal version of, you're not the boss of me. And they don't have a lot of legal rationale in that letter. And when you look at the way that impeachment is set up, it really doesn't make sense structurally that they would even write the things that they've written. The president will get due process rights when the trial goes in the Senate, but this is an investigative stage, and the House has tremendous power here.
And Josh Letterman, the 5-hour gap, you added to some of our understanding of it with a presidential phone call is right in the middle of the somewhere in the 5-hour gap.
Yeah, and this is really critical, Lawrence, because President Trump has continued to say that everything he did with relation to Ukraine was above board, was exactly what a president is supposed to do as they're conducting foreign policy. But now we have new indications that President Trump was aware in real time that members of his own administration, his own diplomats, were raising red flags about this because the U.S. ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, called him and presumably mentioned in that call that he had just heard from Bill Taylor, the top diplomat in Ukraine, that he was concerned that this was, quote, crazy. And the president proceeded with all of this nonetheless. And Sondland, after this phone call, essentially tried to shut down the acting ambassador, Bill Taylor, telling him, look, President Trump says that there's crystal clear no quid pro quo. And also, let's take this offline. Let's not text message about this anymore, apparently cognizant of the fact that they were creating a written record that could ultimately come into public view.
But Chairman Schiff had something to say about that written record today. Let's listen to what he said about it.
Not only is the Congress being deprived of his testimony, the American people being deprived of his testimony today. But we are also aware that the ambassador has text messages or emails on a personal device, which have been provided to the State Department, although we have requested those from the ambassador, and the State Department is withholding those messages as well. Those messages are also deeply relevant to this investigation and the impeachment inquiry.
Congressman Quigley, it sounds like you're going to have to go to court for those.
Absolutely. I practiced criminal defense 10 years. I never had the chutzpah to propose such contradictory defenses. I didn't do anything wrong, so why this elaborate cover-up? And it was all a hoax. He did it and there was nothing wrong, or none of this happened, it's a hoax. The fact is, you're right. It's going to end up in court. I don't see any way that all of these matters don't. And I would like to think that the courts appreciate the urgency of this, the national security implications of this, and they'll move forward a lot faster than they have in the recent past.
Mika, you see the committee's moving faster than it has moved. This subpoena says be here in a week. Give us the documents 2 days before that. And so we've seen an increased pace here by the investigative committees.
Yes, that's right. And you see Chairman Schiff moving very quickly, calling a number of witnesses, asking for documents. But even as he's doing that, you see the administration creating a tremendous record just in talking about this. You saw Rudy Giuliani waving around his cell phone on television saying, I've got these text messages and they'll exonerate us. Look, if they really have nothing to fear here, if they really think what the president did was so innocent, then why are they trying to hide this material from Congress? This does not sound like somebody who's confident that they're actually doing the right thing. It sounds like someone who is really stonewalling and trying to hide the fact that they've done something very seriously wrong, as senior State Department officials have pointed out.
Josh, do we have any insight as to who among these witnesses might actually want to testify and are being blocked by the administration?
Ironically, Lawrence, the only one that we know, based on his own words, wants to testify is Gordon Sondland, because his lawyers today circulated a statement saying, look, we were told by the State Department at 12:30 in the morning, you can't testify. He flew all the way back from Brussels. He wants to testify. He's still ready to do it at a moment's notice. As far as the other diplomats, we don't know for sure because they haven't been speaking, and any good lawyer would probably advise them not to be talking publicly if they're about to testify before Congress. But presumably Ambassador Yovanovitch, who was the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine, Trump pulled her out of that role in May, several months ahead of schedule. Rudy Giuliani had been waging a campaign against her, we now know. Presumably she would want a chance to defend herself, but so far we have not heard any of these diplomats say that on the record.
Congressman Quigley, I can envision a scenario in which the House of Representatives gives a reasonably short amount of time for the Trump administration to comply with these subpoenas. You work it through the court as quickly as you can, but you don't want to wait a year to go through to the Supreme Court on these things. And at a certain point, the House of Representatives starts taking votes on articles of impeachment, possibly in the Judiciary Committee, possibly in the full House, without the information that you're currently seeking, making the argument that you have enough information from the transcript of the phone call. And then you go off to a trial in the United States Senate where the House of Representatives will be accused of having basically prosecuted the case without enough information.
Well, that's why communicating this message and this to the American public is almost as important as it is convincing a jury in the Senate. I trust the American public will see through the contradictory defenses of this White House, the obstruction that's taking place, and the real truth there, and the reason that it matters so much. While we strengthen one case, the articles of impeachment for obstruction, you're right. It probably hurts our ability to put all the evidence we need forward on other articles of the crimes that we see committed by the president elsewhere. Frankly, I thought that the special counsel's report gave us enough information to file articles of impeachment. I thought the special counsel felt that way as well. All we're doing is